Hello, fellow plant enthusiasts. So I'm going to be propagating this cane begonia. I had it growing to where it's toppling over versus staking it in because I had it in a shallow pot. And you can see back here, it started to pick up the soil and tilt over. It's root bound, and it basically is, not good since I need to have it grow vertically. But by growing horizontally, I have all these extra pieces that I'm going to cut off first and propagate. Now here, I have some which I propagated, but I had them in the garage and it's too hot this time of year, so even though they're a tropical plant, they've been suffering. So I just thought I'd show you these, but I'm going to be propagating them in the garage just due to availability of space, and hopefully if they are not suffering, they'll do good, and if I see them suffer, then I'll have to relocate them. So I found these cool pruners, which I'm going to try, that I got them at Lowe's. And if you see, there's a gap in between right there, but it does rub against each other while cutting, so it should be okay. So I'm going to start by taking the cutting from here, and it did an okay job. And I'm just going to go around and just cut all these branches that are big enough. If they're too small, they may not strike when propagating, so I'm not going to worry about them. And then if you lose any leaves, you can chuck them away. You can root the leaves of the Begonia albopicta, or Picta alba, I never remember them, and other cane begonias like angel wings and stuff. And this is like a cool variety of angel wing, if you ask me. But anyway, they will root from the leaf, but unlike peperomias, Venus flytraps, and African violets, and even Cephalotus follicularis, but you have to pull the Venus flytraps and Cephalotus from the very bottom of the leaf where the white tissue is. Anyway, but you can root those easily where you have roots in a new plant growing, but you cannot with the angel wing begonias. So I'm going to go ahead and cut as many as I can, propagate them, and then we'll be repotting this begonia into a much larger pot. I'm at the garage window and I filled 18 cells, a tray, with dirt, and I got the tray that extends above the height of the tray, and the reason being is I hate the ones that are just flush because they do not keep an area which is going to be dry, so then they stay constantly soggy and worse. And you have to be careful though, because these hang to the edge, so most of the domes that go on here, you can't accommodate these trays in there. But what I'm doing is I'm filling this up as close as I can to the rim, because these are going to be seedlings, so I do want them saturated to start. And that means having to do several pours with this watering can. But I'm not pouring from above because I don't want to compact the soil, because by compacting the soil, then the roots won't have as much space to protrude and grow. This way they grow a lot easily and more readily. Or it's just easier on the roots. That's probably a better way to phrase that. But the problem is this is in the garage and it's the middle of summer. It's in July. Today is July 4th. So it's really hot. I'm just sweating over here. And these cane begonias, the tropics aren't as hot as the mid-latitudes because it stays cloudy. The mid-latitudes is where you typically have the deserts and stuff and the hotter, drier regions. So most people think it's always going to be hotter at the equator, but not necessarily so. Basically, the equator, the oceans are going to be warmer, so you have more evaporation, which leads to more clouds, and then less sunny days than the mid-latitudes. So anyway, this is getting there. So it's close enough for now. I'll wait a little bit, so then as the soil that's starting to float, it's really dry. As it starts to slowly soak it in and the water level drops, I'll just add some later. And you don't have to keep it topped off as they're propagating, but just to start, and then you can top it off maybe one more time. It just depends on the environment you're in and how fast they propagate. So with that said, let's go ahead and put the cuttings in there. So I checked the water levels and I had to add more, and you can see it hasn't really soaked in yet to the soil. So it's starting to float because the soil was really dry. I should have used probably a little moister soil, but you open the bag that's already opened and that's what you have. I did end up grabbing some of the smaller pieces of begonia just because I didn't want them growing askewedly, and then when I put the canes upright, they're going to grow crooked. So I'm just going to be sticking them in there. And then if I have like a segment here, I can always take these handy pruners, trim the leaf, so then when I stick it in the soil, it goes in better. But I'm going to actually turn these in so they're facing the light, so then they can photosynthesize and grow faster. You won't really see them grow, however, until they root. So the first bit after you plant them, they're going to look a little anemic, and they're not going to really show you much growth. Once you see them starting to try to stand up, then you know they've rooted and they're starting to grow, and then you'll eventually start seeing new shoots coming out or new growth on it, and you know it's rooted and it's a healthy plant. So unless you keep it in a hot environment like the garage, which as mentioned I'm going to be monitoring, I'm going to just set these there for now. You want to make sure that you want to make sure that they're going to be okay. If I see that they're starting to suffer, I'll have to move them inside. So a lot of those I'm putting in the front are the smaller ones that I pruned later, and then I'll put the larger ones towards the back. So here's another small one. Just going to prune just enough nodes to do a good job rooting in there. And then as they start soaking water, I'm going to have to check back and add more. This nice big one is going to be a happy plant, if the heat in the garage doesn't kill it first. Guess I'll just have to put these on the floor and collect them later. Although I did not have quite enough branches for the 18 cells that I have. So I basically had about 14, which basically means I'm going to have to find 4 other plants to plant in there for propagating. This one, I'm going to cut 2 of the nodes so I can stick it in deep enough because it's a nice tall stem. So now I have these planted and I can wait for them to start rooting and growing and have a bunch of happy, fresh plants. It is smoldering hot and I'm here in the garage. We're going to mix some soil for the cane begonia. So this is such a huge pot. I'm going to actually just dump the soil in here. Like so. But now one thing to note is when you look at the soil, you have some perlite in here and a little bit of roughage. Now this organic stuff, which will help aerate the roots, does decay over time. So then you have the perlite, but it's never enough perlite. Even when they're not succulents, having enough perlite is a good thing for the plants. So I have this bag and that's one reason why I'm mixing this in the garage, because perlite does create dust. So I'm not going to do the whole thing at once, just a little bit. You want to make sure you're not going to stick this all the way to the bottom so you don't compromise the base of the pot. But you see how as it mixes, it's looking a lot better and more aerated. And this way it can help the soil dry faster to keep the roots healthy and not waterlogged. because one thing with bigger pots, if water goes to the bottom and then accumulate over time, it won't be good for the plant unless it likes saturated roots. So here it looks equally mixed, evenly mixed. And now I can add a little bit more soil. So I have to like hold the soil to balance it while dumping in there. Then I'm gonna have to come in and sweep the excess that I've spilled. This bag that I just opened, it's wetter, so the other soil from the previous bag was drier. So that cane begonia in the pot I had it had a lot more perlite than this, so I may add a little more, but just to save a little time, I'm going to pour directly in the root. So it mixed nice and evenly, as you can see. But as this pot settles down, or the soil, it's going to look a little low. So I'm actually going to add a little more perlite. And a little more soil. One thing to keep in mind is the soil from the pot that I'll be transplanting from. I think I have enough perlite. Okay, I'm going to add a little more soil though. Just doing this is a good way to help it mix. Okay, I'm going to leave it at there for now. I can always add a little more soil later. And if the soil covers the perlite, you know, the little top layer, it will look more sightly actually. So to transplant this, I'm actually going to make a depression in the middle and make it sure it's wide enough for the plant. Oops. Gonna have a mess to clean up now. And I do, if I have to go from underneath, I can. Now you can see how it's been leaning. So what I'm going to do is grab these canes and I have to move them away from the tripod and table, etc. and see if I can pull these up without damaging it. It's really root bound and hard to pull out, but going from the weak spot where it started to sag seems to be a good location, and shaking off some soil actually will help as well. Yeah, it's slowly coming out. So you just have to knead it just wiggle it through. One problem is it's root bound, and this lip goes under, which is why it's catching. So you need to make sure you're not going to be damaging the plant, but here it comes. And you can see the root ball. Some people like to separate the root balls. I have a mess here I'll have to clean up in a moment. But I like to just keep the plants by itself. So now I have this, but I forgot to grab the stakes. And the stakes are high at planting this successfully because it damages easily. That's a joke, by the way. It damages it can recover. But then I'll move these over, and I want to get some stakes so I can get this to grow vertically. See, it was leaning so much and that was growing vertically that now by moving this over, that thing is leaning, that piece. So I'm going to have to let it lean for a little bit and go get some stakes. So I went and brought some stakes in from the garage. And yeah, this new apartment, it has a built-in garage. So I'm going to have to pull this up, remove some soil, put it on the edge so I can get this thing a little deeper. And you see now it's deeper. Then I will have to put a little more soil. It's better to have not filled this heavily with soil because it would have made a bigger mess than I did. So then I would have had more to clean up. So now that I have this in there, I'm going to stand these up and take these stakes and just stick them in. And these are nice plastic stakes, so I kind of like them because they are good for something like this. And that will hold them in place, and I have ribbons. So just a ribbon going around. And the reason to use a ribbon is because the ribbon isn't as abrasive as if you use something like twine or something that's sharp. This one needs to go in at a slightly different angle. There we go. So it will keep, if it rubs against the plant, it will keep it from getting damaged as easily. So I'm going to have to tie this. And this ribbon is a little tight. I should tie a couple together so that it can stay vertical, but it's actually staying vertical by itself. Nevertheless, I'm going to use a ribbon. So I'm tightening this ribbon, and I realized I was not in frame. Let me move this closer. Move the camera up. And zoom out. Okay, there we go. So now I can I'm basically tying this and making sure that it's going to just be held in place. Just something simple like that. I can move these as needed, like this piece here. I'm going to move this in here more, and hopefully they'll start becoming more vertical, and the new shoots that come up will be more vertical, and this plant will look better as time goes by. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video on how to propagate and transplant some cane begonias, in this case the Bambusiforme begonia. Thanks for watching and happy planting.